Hello everyone and welcome back to season 2 of the PGN Podcast. This podcast has one simple message: to normalise the conversation on resilience, our environment and our future in a climate changed world, with our communities at the heart of it all. Our primary goal is to foster discussions about flooding, climate resilience and related environmental issues to better support communities. We're here to take a deeper dive into the conversations we began in season 1. We will be connecting hearts and minds, ambition, passion alongside our community and experts. Together we'll work towards building a more resilient future in our ever-changing world. I am Meshi Taka, the project lead for Project Groundwater Northumbria, which is what PGN stands for, and your host for this season. Let's jump right in. So welcome back to a brand new episode of the PGN Podcast. In season 1, we examined how the kind of integration of blue green infrastructure into urban areas can enhance our quality of life and bolster flood resilience. Today, we have the return of a very familiar face who needs no introduction to discuss his recent endeavours and how his efforts are advancing the creation of green and blue infrastructure in our cities. Welcome back, Carl.
Thank you, Meshi.
For our new listeners and viewers out there, who are you and what have you been up to?
So I'm Carl Hodgson. I work for Newcastle City Council. I've been in local government for 20 years. 12 of that has been in what would consider as a flood risk management or drainage sector. And then the other 8 has been in transport and sustainable transport and transport engineering. So I've had various sector experience, obviously coming originally from the PGN team technical coordinator. I've moved into a new role on a new project, which is Blue Green Newcastle, which is looking at how we can integrate flood risk infrastructure into the city, considering everything but flood risk, as it were. So it's quite an exciting project. It's something I'm really proud to be part of. Like PGN, obviously, it's something I feel can change a region for a better, not just in that local focused area, but change the aspiration and behaviours of the region as a whole.
We see BGN and PGN as a bit of a family project as well.
Definitely, yeah.
I was saying to you before, distant cousins, so we're still family.
Yeah.
But yeah, just back to basics a little bit. Can we just walk us through what blue-green infrastructure is?
We're at the start line of this project as it is. So I've been spending time speaking with potential stakeholders and engagement and community groups where they aren't necessarily familiar with flood risk management as it was. So what I've done to introduce Blue Green Newcastle, I've basically described it as blue. Blue is the challenge. Blue is the flooding. That's the reason we need the project to be better prepared against flooding. Green is the opportunity. So green is, if you think of it in a different way, you can potentially change that solution and the way that project behaves. And then Newcastle is obviously the place we can make it happen. So putting that into kind of a different context, I think as this project's been developed originally through the Blue Green Cities Initiative with Newcastle University before my time at Newcastle, we've looked at the city in a number of different ways. But you look at the history of the city, and you look at it. Before it was built, before it was urbanised, there was a number of different watercourses flowed through our city. Now beneath our city, as we've urbanised, they've been built over, piped over. And that networks of natural watercourses being replaced by engineered water management, so public sewers, highway drainage, a lot of that surface water, as Richie Woodhouse explained in the previous series, has to be treated. It's surface water, it's good clean water that goes in and has to be treated.
So very energy intensive.
Yeah, energy, carbon intensive, and then we think, right, well, in a very significant event, if you look at the flooding pictures from Thunder Thursday, you can see that surface water flow route mimics those historic streams.
Waterways, yes.
Yeah, so that's the blue. It's understanding where that water's going to go and understanding that historic natural water network,
Pathways.
blue network with pathways, and then what's been engineered in the past, understanding how all that works. Now green infrastructure is trying to replicate through what are called nature-based solutions, and working that into an urban environment in this situation in Newcastle. Now Newcastle's quite unique in the fact, uphill of the city centre we've got the town moor.
Yes.
So that is obviously agricultural land. It's grazing, agricultural grazing land. It's protected land, and that is something that is a massive opportunity for blue-green infrastructure. But it's also looking at things like green roofs, green walls, and when we're saying green roofs, it doesn't necessarily have to be ecology related. It could be what we could call sky gardens, for example, where it's functional social spaces, give amenity value. Could even be something like, as tried in Rotterdam and demonstrated as a success. They call it dak akker, which is roof farm. So things like urban agriculture, grey water as well. So using that water that falls on the roof of properties to flush water, to flush toilets, etc.
Yeah.
So the roofs are a good opportunity, but then it's looking at things like roads and how we can integrate green infrastructure, planting, swales, even tree pits. Look at how they can be implemented through the city too.
But just to summarize, would you then say that, listening to the kind of the descriptions you've made, would you say that the blue infrastructure is kind of the water related element? So your rivers, your lakes, your wetlands and ponds, and then your green infrastructure.
Yeah. So blue green infrastructure, what we've got to make sure is it can have a capacity to either hold or absorb, hold or absorb that water. So, when that water falls now, as I said, it'll either go into the River Tyne or it will go to Howden to be treated. What if, and this is in significant rainfall events, we have flooding incidents. What if there is benefit from what we put in every time it rains? So when looking at Blue Green Newcastle, there's 6 key elements we've identified as part of that. So one's flood management, carbon sequestration as well. So making sure that water's absorbed by trees and planting, creating amenity, looking at potential green energy opportunities as well. So how solar on roofs, for example, working with green infrastructure could work. Ecology and biodiversity, and then shade and cooling, because shade and cooling is really important as well, because in the past, when we've looked at things like this and how to reduce the risk of flooding, it's always been seen as a flood management project or a flood mitigation project. But you can potentially reword or rebrand that as a climate adaptation project. And when you do that, you're looking at many more wider benefits, but also as well, you take it out of that silo of hydrology. And one of the things that Blue Green Newcastle, particularly through early workshops we've done, is almost remove flood management from this to get the views of people like transport planners, highway engineers, ecologists, our net zero team, just to see what their aspirations are for the city and how we can potentially work flood management into that.
Link it all up.
Yes, exactly.
Blue Green Newcastle.
Yes.
And I've known you for a while, Carl, and
Yeah.
I think this is something that you've been championing for a while. I remember last season you talked about what Sheffield has been doing as well.
Yeah.
And it's good to see that other cities are stepping up to the challenge. Just for context, can you just talk us through the Sheffield project? 'Cause, I think you made our bloopers last year as well.
Yeah, Sheffield is the one, that it's been applied. It's there. It's physical. It's in the ground, and it's in a city with very similar social environmental challenges that Newcastle has, which I think is absolutely great. And what's happened there is I went to university in Sheffield back in the early 2000s, and where Greater Green is now, it was a ring road. It was the northern area of the city, and you wouldn't really go north of that ring road for any purpose. It was industry, it was warehouses. And what's happened is the Sheffield have realigned their Ring Road VA61 further north, which has allowed that space that was used by the Ring Road to be taken up by Blue Green infrastructure. So that green infrastructure, that Blue Green infrastructure there, it has swales, it has rain gardens, stormwater planters, which absorb that water that falling on the ground, but also attenuates it before it goes back into the River Don at that point. But also it's integrated with active travel corridors as well. So there's great pedestrian and walking routes, but also pocket parks as well. So social areas you can sit at. And returning there last year and walking through Greater Green after it's been completed, you see people sitting there having their lunch where 20 years ago no one would go, and it's connected that central area of the city with the northern belt where the River Don is really well, and it's really inspiring. And it's not just Sheffield that things like that have been done as well. I love to read and see about different cities and areas that have changed, not just through flood management or surface water management, but through urban design. So one example of how a city's being connected is Boston in America, where you've got basically you had downtown Boston and you had Boston Harbor to the east, and between it was the Interstate 95, so about 8 or 10 lanes of highway traffic, and they built something called the Rose Kennedy Greenway. So basically it was a park over the Interstate 95, and it's just allowed this connection in. And you see that from an urban design perspective, and you think, well, actually, if that can be achieved there, and that hasn't taken into consideration surface water management or flood management, but that shows you the opportunity of if you do that. But now, knowing what we know about Blue Green infrastructure, we could implement a Blue Green corridor and something like that. Yeah. And it's, because I found that in Boston in 2012 when I went to Boston to see the Boston Celtics play. But there you go. But in addition to that, look to the continent in places like Rotterdam and Copenhagen. So Rotterdam, as I've mentioned, Taka, which is urban farming, Dak Park, which is a park on top of the shopping centre there, and they've also got something called it's basically called Water Square. I don't want to try and say that in Dutch because my Dutch isn't that great, and that's a five-a-side pitch, like a sunken five-a-side football pitch, that fills with water from the nearby residential tower blocks around it and attenuates that water. So 99% of the time it can be used to play football or what have you. And then that really rainy day, it stops other people flooding and it fills with water. Yeah. And then Copenhagen, there was another one which I actually read on a youth football blog, and that's in the Carlsberg area. Always easy to remember that one. And I think it's not Norborough United. Again, I don't want to push my Danish on, but basically they had a similar area there, and where we have these the mixed use games areas, the muggers, which have got the high fences up, and it's basically you've got 2 rows of seating come down, and you've got this area that can be attenuation, but what they've found is that's increased the amount of girls playing junior football because it's a more accessible place to play football. So it's reaping those amenity and social benefits of putting things like this into here. And having a 3-year-old daughter, it's kind of, it's great to know that there's safe and better places coming, and by the time she's kicking a football about socially, we could hopefully have something like that in where I live.
I mean, that's brilliant though, because you've just kind of straight off the bat picked up 4 or 5 different examples in different parts of the world, and I'm guessing those are the types of projects and infrastructure and buildings and sites that have inspired what we're looking at today, which is Blue Green Newcastle. Yes. What are the specific ambitions and goals of Blue Green Newcastle?
Ambitions and goals. So what we're trying to project here is our city is for everyone, and we need to make sure that anything delivered through Blue Green Newcastle is something that considers people who live, work and visit the city. So it's, we've done initial workshops with other internal departments, but also external stakeholders as well. And what we've found from those initial discussions is there is a lot of ambition and a lot of drive to make positive change, but there's a lot of, and I think this is shown in PGN itself as well. There's a lot of pride in industrial heritage and heritage of the city and things like that.
It's part of the identity.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, it's part of the identity. And how can we use blue green infrastructure to link places like the Discovery Museum better with the with the Central Station? How do we integrate things like active travel corridors? What about things like, low carbon heat networks? Is there potential in the future where they're coming in to integrate that with blue green infrastructure? Because the city, as I said, the city is for everyone. Take Grey Street, for example.
Yes.
There's a few rain gardens going in on there right now, and I advise anyone to go down and have a look at them. And when that came
in the daytime, right?
Yeah, in the daytime, yeah.
Not just the cocktails.
No. It's that's exactly what
that's what we're discussing here.
Yeah, that's exactly the point there. I think we can't be selfish here because we're trying to reduce. My job is to reduce the impact of flooding to the city. Never prevent it, but reduce the risk and impact of it
and manage.
Yeah, and manage it, and then we've got a number of rain gardens in. It's not overkill, but what you've got to do for Grey Street alone, you've got to consider public transport movements, active travel movements, so pedestrian movements, cycling movements, the local businesses, not just people getting to and from them, but deliveries, loading, the utilities under the ground that no one sees. Then you've got the desire to, particularly in this post-COVID world, to have things like pavement cafes, etc. So you think of how many different people, and that's just the daytime, as you said. There's a massive nightlife culture on that street as well.
Yes,
we've got to consider that whatever we put in is safe and appropriate, but also doesn't impact how other people
accessible.
Yeah. How other people use the environment how they would like to. But as well, I think what's really important here is people understand why they're going in and those wider benefits. So it's not just there to manage water. Because these rain gardens are going to be planted up, there's carbon sequestration. It's green in the city. It's creating better air. It's kind of, would really like businesses, like smaller businesses, to feel part of this and make sure that they know why it's going in and have pride and advocacy of these as well when people understand the wider benefits.
Yeah, and I think particularly with Grey Street, at the very top where you have the monument, you already have the seating areas and you have the rain gardens and the beds up there, and it's kind of working its way down Grey Street to the junction.
Yeah.
And so personally, having been somebody who loves that area in the summer, and you can just kind of sit there and enjoy the fact that there's this lovely, beautiful space to relax in. There tends to be activities and entertainment, but it has a kind of an underlying functional element to it as well.
Yeah.
So going back to your point about multifunctional benefits, being inclusive when we design for environment as opposed to designing for just one thing.
Yes, exactly. I think as well, the way things are funded, we've got to make sure we are spending our pound on twice, in essence. If we can get something that manages surface water but also gives a social space for play or creates biodiversity, and again, it's a brilliant opportunity, doing more than just one thing.
You made a point earlier about linking up different sectors, and I like the example about working with different teams at the council to do that. When we talk about climate adaptation, there's still conversation out there in silos. So we almost talk about green energy as if it's separate to flood resilience. And based on your experience, what type of advice would you give to enable that more wider sector crossover?
I think initially for me, because I've came from a transport engineering background, when I've been working in flood risk, I've seen a lot of synergies and commonalities between what are delivered in sustainable transport, say with Sustrans, for example, and then with Environment Agency-led schemes, and you just think the similar areas, problems and solutions for different sectors need to be done in that same road space. And it started from an initial conversation I had with Lawrence, one of our transport planners, and Alison, one of our landscape architects. And we just said, look, let's just go out to one particular part of Newcastle, and we'll walk around and we'll talk about what you would like, what I would like, you know, what the three of us would like. And it was terrible weather. I can remember walking around it, and but what we actually found was a lot of the solutions. So, for example, where there's parking problems and you need parking nibs, if you made that planted, that satisfied your landscape architect. The nib satisfied your transport planner, but then it also had blue green capabilities as well. And I think just sitting down, engaging, and understanding the needs of your internal stakeholders really helps, and that's just done through time and nurturing relationships with your colleagues,
building those bonds in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were at the Innovation Festival earlier this year, and we obviously were exhibiting, but I got to walk over to a stand presented by a school, and there was I don't know if you saw, a little prototype building.
Right.
And it was their affordable, sustainable home. But what I found interesting about this particular model was the girls had designed a home where they captured the runoff, particularly rainwater, but also grey water.
Yeah.
And that powered a generator, which then provided power for the house.
Yeah.
So essentially they were using a water resource, what could be a flood problem, to then create renewable energy or create green energy.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, these are schoolgirls. They hadn't subscribed to, oh, this is flooding, oh, this is this. They were just thinking about, we want to create something that's affordable and accessible. And in doing that, they had, without even realizing what they'd done, created what we were discussing a lot last year, kind of a reusing water and storing water, which slows the flow for flood management benefits. But also it was generating affordable energy, which then takes that's
it. It's getting two ticks, isn't it? You're getting two uses from it. And what I've found, because I attend the Newcastle Youth Climate Change Summit every year, and I engage with, I think it's 14 to 18-year-olds, and what you find is the school children and pupils you talk to are expecting a lot more to be done. They're a lot more climate aware, and it's almost, we are a transition generation where we've got to make sure what we're handing out over is sustainable. It's we're at that tipping point now, and I think that's broadly explained. But the fact that the children are leading and coming up with ideas like this, and I've had similar ideas, and a lot of those have been on engagement and who to talk to and things like that. But in addition to the youth, what I would say is, I went to Paris last year for an event called I4C, which is Impetus for Change, but I4C is in seeing the future. Very clever, play on acronym.
I4C,
and it was people from Paris Council, the Barcelona, Prague, and Bergen as well. And I went with Newcastle University, and what we found was the stopping block in Barcelona for implementing climate change or climate adaptation projects, which would be more for heat or drought, are similar to what we have in England, i.e. that political buy-in, how you fund it, but also as well how you guarantee maintenance for the future. And you just think the way kids are going, the way our future generation are pushing this, we should hopefully see that want to change and that want to invest in it. And it's just how we give this physical value, how we make it, climate change and climate adaptation and the science behind why we need to make that change, How do we make that physical and real? How do we make the intangible tangible?
Going back to the example, and you have kind of described this earlier on with referring to the different kind of silo groups that you almost have to bring together to achieve this vision for BGN, and in doing that, building the bonds that then, I guess, enable the collaboration. The generation coming in are passionate about the bigger goal. They're less concerned about whether it's a particular stream. It's just, this is what we need. And perhaps what we need to do a bit more of is bring them around the decision-making table, bring them around a creative table.
Yeah.
Because they are not, and it's not in a bad way, but they're not held back by some of the blockers or rules or control measures that we have been.
We've been, and again,
conditioned to an extent.
We are professionals. We're training what we've done. We follow the process, you know, and we are almost held down. There's a glass ceiling of policy.
We're conditioned to tick some boxes, to follow a format, and they're coming in with no presetting. They just have a vision.
And one of the workshops we did earlier in the year, we invited external stakeholders. So this was people from, say, Nexus, the university, Freeman, lots of different people came. And what we said was, imagine you're 5 and you're not dragged down by policy and what you know about kind of financing and funding and things like that. How would you redesign Newcastle? And the answers we got were pretty far out. But then when you take those barriers down, that's where you start to see potential. And
but I think we can go further. I think we can literally bring the 5-year-olds into the room and ask them. And I say this, my son is going to be 6 later on. He is really, really obsessed about the environment, particularly plastic. And what we started doing when we go for a walk, and he's like, "Mommy, get a bag, put some gloves on."
Yeah.
And it's just a walk with a dog, but we litter pick along the way.
Yeah.
And it's just his thing, and he gets really upset about littering and plastic. And we went once to the Discovery Museum, and we'd gone really early one day, and it's just that parking was just littered. Yeah. And he literally just stopped, and he was horrified.
Yeah.
And I think that I really appreciate when we challenge grown-ups to think like they're less inhibited by rules and things. But there's a subconscious element to that after like 20 years or 10 years in industry, you can only do so far. So I guess, can we go further? Can we bring them into the room? With the best of intentions, I can mimic what my son would say, but he would still come up with something that I could never imagine. So one suggestion is you have a zoo on top of Eldon Square, which, you know, that's pretty far out. Why not?
But you think, right, okay, a sky park, you know, a social park on the roof of the city, you know, a park in the sky, that's a real opportunity, you know, and it's kind of, it's little ideas like that. If you really think about it, there's some sense to it, and it really, it's been quite interesting, to be honest. I mean, from these sessions we had with the grown-ups anyway, we had 6 study areas across the city, so just very localized areas, and we had 154 different suggestions of elements. And what I've done is I've divided those into sort of amenity, environment, transport, and then stakeholder or planning opportunities as well. So we understand where there are potential synergies with other departments, etc. But what we've found is a lot of them are on roofs of buildings, and then a lot more are on the public highways. So we've got to understand how landowners, building owners, property owners could repurpose their roofs, what their willingness to be. So that's the start of, you know, we're at the start of that journey now. I can't tell you how that's going to go yet. But then working with our highway authority, you know, having highway engineers and maintenance engineers in the room at the very start what I'm hoping here is we can develop something with them, and it's been done in Sheffield, that can give us a standard to construct things where we know how, and we know how to do it and ensure it is feasible to do it, because it's great spending that capital money to put something in, but if it's not maintained for its life, it ain't going to work.
That is the biggest challenge, I think. In the past, when we've looked at some of the standards around roads and highways, and even things like having swells, the biggest challenge, and you touched on that at the start, is maintenance. How do you live and take care of them?
Yes.
And I think for the most part, it's just been in the difficult box.
Yes.
So you almost want to tackle that difficult box to create that sustainable long-term vision or make it viable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's ensuring that it continues to give wider benefits, and it does give wider benefits as well.
Continues to adapt as well.
Yeah.
Because we have a changing climate. You don't want to create something else that's so stuck that it takes you another 50 or 100 years to come up with something else.
So a big thing that's came up through these workshops is dwell time. So basically dwell time is, so I walk from Central Station in Newcastle Civic Centre, and I walk from I walk from A to B, but maybe if there was more park or more greenery within that route, I would sit and have time there. I'd buy a coffee, buy a sandwich, sit and spend more,
read a book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a big part of this, particularly in this post-COVID world, is giving people reasons to come back into the city, spend time in the city.
Create an experience, not just.
Is there an aspiration to bring more people in to live in the city as well? That's something else that's been talked about in workshops by stakeholders and partners, where there is an aspiration to make it a place where people always feel safe. Safety and security, that's another element that Blue Green infrastructure could help deliver, make these environments feel safe on an evening. And these are all things that, from a flood risk engineering point of view, from a hydrology perspective, you would never even think of.
But it's not one or the other, though. That's the point.
No.
It can be all inclusive.
Yeah.
So who are your partners then?
Internally, no one's off the table. We've got transport planners, highway engineers, ecologists, landscape architects, economic development, net zero. But what we've found is when we've sat down with all of these different internal departments, we've got an understanding of the policies and strategies that drive them. We've absorbed that, and we're in the process of writing a strategic vision which will outline how Blue Green Newcastle will come forward at the minute. So that should hopefully be completed by next year. But you also understand that the policy and the wider ambition fits in absolutely with Blue Green Newcastle and the aspirations. So those active travel corridors that our transport planners want to deliver, some of them are directly up and down surface water flow routes, and the elements of net zero, our net zero strategy. We need to, when you look at that, we need to collaborate and deliver these together. This is a good facilitator of some of those ambitions. But in addition to that, Newcastle City Council are the risk management authority, the lead local flood authority responsible for surface water flooding, but also Northumbrian Water, sewer flooding, and the Environment Agency with a strategic overview of flooding in the River Tyne as well. So we are the three main stakeholders. So Blue Green Newcastle is a partnership between those three organisations, but as well, there are wider partners outside of the strategic or the risk management authorities, as it were. So the Freemen of Newcastle, obviously their influence on the town were, and their kind of land stewardship authorities they have, that's a great organisation to have on board. Urban Green as well, in who manage the parks in Newcastle as well. Parklands are really important because Blue Green infrastructure is not creating necessarily green infrastructure from nothing, but it's improving the existing green spaces and open spaces that's there.
It's making sure the existing spaces go further and
Yes,
benefits the brain.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And Newcastle University are a stakeholder as well, where we, we're speaking a lot more with them, and then Net Zero Northeast England too.
Yes.
So Jess obviously was on a podcast last year.
Yes.
And she, myself and her have done a lot of work on looking at things like carbon insetting or local carbon offsetting. Exactly. And again, I think that's another thing that I would say is watch this space, because to fund something like Blue Green Newcastle, we can't fund it specifically through those traditional.
Well, you've kind of walked into that one, because
Yeah.
I think last year we did cover extensively how challenging the existing funded streams can be when you want to have something that's just beyond one silo, so more inclusive approach.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So for other local authorities, organizations looking to kind of do something similar, what advice do you have when it comes to getting past some of those limitations that funding can put in place?
I think one of the key impacts here is, in these workshops that we've done initially have identified, you need to be aligned with your transport and highways people, because if work or if features are going into your public domain, the likelihood is it's going to be within adopted highways. So not only do they need to be on board with the design and maintenance of them, but also you could potentially, something like Blue Green Newcastle, where it's looking right across the entire city, and the ambition is not just the city centre here, but looking at the communities as well in the longer term. How can we integrate blue green infrastructure into traffic calming schemes? It's not just how we can integrate an active travel corridor into Blue Green Newcastle. It's a two-way street.
Yes.
So what we're looking at now is, a SUDS audit on a highway scheme or a design scheme like that, which I think is really exciting, because I don't know anyone else that's doing that, and I'm it's a good thing. It's a good thing coming forward, and things like Pilgrim Street and Pilgrim Quarter, we're getting some SUDS in along there that wouldn't necessarily have happened if we didn't do that.
And it's happening alongside developments and growth.
Yes,
you talked about urbanization and
exactly. So again, economic development and planners, that's a key element, and it's not just the planning as in planning applications. It's that long-term the spatial planning, etc., and understanding and identifying areas that can be used for blue green infrastructure. And another interesting thing, I had a lot of engagement with Alistair Scott from Northumbria University last year, and that was looking at how blue green infrastructure in greenbelt land could be utilised, particularly on upstream of catchments, outside of Blue Green Newcastle. Ousburn's a good example of that, and Anne Rees is doing some fantastic work there with the Ousburn Way. Newcastle City Council are part of that, and I think it's going to be really interesting with Northumbrian Water and Environment Agency to see what comes forward and comes out of that. And a lot of that's about water quality and improving the environment around Jesmond Dean.
Water quality is a big one at the moment. The focus on how we treat our waterways and what goes into it. And I know water companies have been under the spotlight, but the conversation on water quality when it comes to surface water runoff is a bit bigger than just what the water companies do. It's what comes off our highways, it's what comes off agricultural land.
Yes.
And I don't think we have time to cover that in depth.
That's a whole other podcast.
It's a whole different conversation. But also when we talk about urbanization, there is the kind of existing issue, which is a stretched underground infrastructure. So linking up blue-green infrastructure and creating that kind of flexibility using nature-based solutions to take that additional demand.
And
it's key, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, I think that's where you come back to that. Blue-green infrastructure doesn't just benefit the extreme event. Yes. It's every time it rains.
It's that resilience embedded into
and
everything.
For anyone that hasn't been already, the National Green Infrastructure Centre at the Helix at Newcastle University is a great place to walk around. And there's some examples there of where sustainable drainage is being used. rain gardens. There's a swale there. There's a
rain
small
gardens
wetland.
and steps all linked
Yeah, and it just shows the art of the possible in real life there, and that's kind of what we want to apply across the city as a whole.
So before we close, I've got one more question for you, Carl.
Right.
What's next?
What's next?
Yes.
So hopefully, I think the initial stage for Blue Green Newcastle is the pilot area, which is Exhibition Park in the town. So working with the Freeman of Newcastle upon Tyne and Urban Green to look at how that surface water behaves coming off the town towards the Exhibition Park lake, reduce the impact of the water into Exhibition Park lake, and how that basically exceeds the lake itself and then goes over towards Brandland Village and then down Central Motorway towards the city. So that's a pilot project, and then from there we're obviously going to be looking at other areas, which will be the Pan and Burn catchment, which is from the BBC area of where the BBC building is at Grandstand Road, through the university campus and RVI campus, etc. And then another catchment is the Skinner Burn as well, which is what would be St James's Boulevard. Oh, is that Lamburn? That's Lamburn. And then we've got Lord Burn and Eric Burn, which is the Grey Street and Dean Street area.
Yes.
So what we're doing for this project itself is we are taking each historic catchment and trying to do a plan for each catchment. So if anyone's got any interest of being part of this project, please get in touch. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for the city to kind of take these environmental challenges together.
Yeah, we're very excited for BGN as well. So we'll be keeping in touch, Carl. Thank you so much for joining us.
Brilliant. It's nice to be back.
And we will be adding links alongside this episode when it does go out, so people can link up with BGN and read up on the project as well if they're interested. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Project Groundwater Northumbria is a research and innovation project funded by DEFRA as part of the £200 million Flood and Coastal Innovation Programmes, which is managed by the Environment Agency. The programmes will drive innovation in flood and coastal resilience and adaptation to a changing climate. This project is led by Gateshead Council with regional and national partners. With this funding, we are working on practical, innovative actions and knowledge sharing with our communities at the heart. For more information about PGN, please visit www.pgn.org.uk.